Hey everyone, welcome back to Vintage Car Chronicles. Today, we're shifting gears a bit with a deep dive, and you know me, I love a good deep dive. And today, we're looking at the story of Panoz, a real American original in motorsports. I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, they really are a fascinating story.
Absolutely. We've got some amazing sources lined up, and I can't wait to get into the history, the innovation, and really the audacity of this incredible brand.
I think you'll be surprised by how much Panoz accomplished on and off the track. It's a story about ambition, a little bit of a, rebellious spirit,
Yeah.
and a whole lot of passion for pushing the limits of what's possible in the car world.
Could have said it better myself. So let's start at the very beginning. Panos wasn't always this household name. Their journey actually began across the Atlantic in Ireland with Dan Panoz and his work with this small company called Thomson Motor Company.
That's right. TMC, as it was known, they were building kit cars at the time. Specifically, the Costin model designed by Frank Costin, who some listeners might know from his work on some, pretty iconic cars like the Maserati Birdcage and the Lotus 7. Unfortunately, TMC ran into some financial trouble.
And this is where Dan's father, Don Panoz, enters the picture.
Exactly.
Now, John was already a successful entrepreneur,
Yeah.
Had made his fortune in pharmaceuticals with the invention of the nicotine patch.
Right.
But he also had this deep love for cars, and seeing the potential in his son's passion, he stepped in and acquired TMC.
It was a bold move for sure, but it really shows, Don's character. He was a true visionary, always willing to take a chance on something that he believed in.
Yeah, he seems like a man who wasn't afraid of a challenge.
Not at all.
So with TMC now under their belt, Dan and his team of talented engineers started working on what would become the first Panoz sports car. They wanted to create something unique, something that really blended, American muscle with that European finesse.
And that's exactly what they did in 1992 with the launch of the Panoz Roadster. This wasn't just some rebodied Costin. No, this was a complete transformation. They scrapped the four-cylinder engine and dropped in a roaring Ford V8. That true symbol of American power. I mean, can you imagine the sound of that engine echoing through the Irish countryside?
Oh man, I can only imagine what a sight that was. And they didn't stop there. They pushed even further with the Panoz AIV, which stood for Aluminum Intensive Vehicle.
Yeah, the AIV, that was really a testament to Panos's commitment to innovation. They were pioneers in using aluminum for both the body and chassis of the car, and the result was this lightweight and incredibly rigid structure, and it really set the stage for their future, showcasing their dedication to pushing the boundaries of materials and design.
It's amazing to think this small company, born out of a father's belief in his son's dream, was already making waves in the automotive world, but this just the beginning for Panoz. Their story, takes a thrilling turn when they set their sights on the world of motorsports, specifically the legendary 24 Hours of Le Mans.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And that's where the Panoz Esperante GTR1 comes in.
Yeah.
Now, this wasn't just a car. This was a statement. It was their way of saying, hey, world, we're here to compete with the best, and we're not afraid to do things a little differently.
Now, when you think of Le Mans race cars, you probably picture those sleek mid-engine machines, right?
Right.
Well, the Esperante GTR1 completely threw that convention out the window.
Yeah, they went with a front engine design, which, raised a few eyebrows at the time. But, Panoz, they had a vision. They believed that by placing the massive 6.0-liter Roush-built Ford V8 up front, they could achieve better weight distribution and ultimately better handling.
It was a bold move, for sure, and it definitely made the Esperante GTR1 stand out from the crowd. But it was just about looks. This car had the performance to back it up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Esperante GTR1 was a beast on the track, capable of reaching some incredible speeds. And, there's actually a funny story about one of the two road-legal GTR1s that they ever built. It was briefly owned by Noel Edmonds, the British TV personality.
Wait, Noel Edmonds, like the Deal or No Deal guy?
Yeah, that's the one. He apparently loved cars and actually drove his purple Esperante GTR1 all the way to Le Mans in 1997. Can you imagine driving a race car with all its quirks and raw power on public roads?
I can't even imagine. That's crazy. It really shows you the unique character of these Panoz cars. They were built for the track, but they were also meant to be enjoyed, even if it meant, a slightly bumpy ride.
Right.
And speaking of Le Mans, the Esperante GTR1 achieved some remarkable success in its racing career, including a historic victory at the 1998 Petit Le Mans race right here in the United States.
Yeah, for sure.
That win really cemented Panoz's place in motorsports history.
Absolutely.
It's clear that Panoz wasn't afraid to take risks and challenge the status quo, but their story doesn't end there. In fact, the GTR1 was just the start of a much bigger vision for American motorsports, a vision spearheaded by the one and only Don Panoz.
Yeah, that's a great point. Don wasn't content with just building race cars. He wanted to create a platform for endurance racing in North America, something that could rival the prestige and the excitement of Le Mans, and that's where his next chapter begins.
Yeah.
Don Panoz was really a force to be reckoned with in the motorsports world. He had this incredible drive to not just participate in the sport, but to really elevate the entire, landscape of American endurance racing.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how he really used his business acumen,
Yeah.
to shape the racing world. He understood that creating a successful racing series, it wasn't just about the cars, it was about building a whole ecosystem.
Absolutely. He saw a gap in the American racing scene. At the time, there wasn't really a series that captured the spirit and the challenge of endurance racing, quite like the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
Yeah.
He wanted to create something that would attract, the top teams, the best drivers, but also really captivate fans and create a lasting legacy.
So he took matters into his own hands, and in 1999, he founded the American Le Mans Series, or ALMS, a bold move. But Don had a clear vision for what he wanted to achieve.
And that vision, it went beyond just creating a new series. He understood the importance of infrastructure, the fan experience. So he invested heavily in acquiring and revitalizing some of North America's most iconic racetracks.
He didn't just buy these tracks. He poured resources into, upgrading facilities, improving safety, enhancing the overall spectator experience.
Yeah.
It was a testament to his commitment to building a world-class racing series.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these tracks. Road Atlanta, a really challenging and scenic circuit in Georgia, was already a favorite among drivers, but Don saw its potential and he made significant improvements to the track and the infrastructure.
Then there's Mosport, a historic and demanding track up in Canada.
Yeah.
Don recognized its significance in North American motorsports history and invested in bringing it up to modern standards.
And of course, we can't forget Sebring International Raceway down in Florida, home to, one of the most grueling endurance races in the world. The 12 hours of Sebring, Don's vision, breathed new life into this legendary track and ensured its place as a cornerstone of American motorsports.
It's amazing how Don Panoz was able to connect the dots and create this thriving ecosystem for endurance racing. He understood that a successful series needed more than just great cars. It needed passionate fans, challenging tracks, a supportive infrastructure.
Yeah, his approach was really holistic. He wasn't just interested in short-term gains. He was building a foundation for the future of American motorsports.
And speaking of the future, let's talk about one of the most radical and innovative projects that Don Panoz championed, the Delta Wing.
Ah, yes, the Delta Wing. It was like something out of a science fiction movie, When it first appeared, people couldn't believe their eyes. It was so different from anything they'd ever seen before.
You really have to admire Don's willingness to embrace such a radical concept. The Delta Wing was a true departure from conventional race car design.
The idea behind the Delta Wing was to achieve both speed and fuel efficiency by, reducing weight and aerodynamic drag. It was a bold experiment in pushing the boundaries of what was possible in motorsports.
Initially, it was designed for IndyCar, but it didn't quite fit the regulations at the time. However, the Delta Wing did find a home at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2012, competing in the Garage 56 category.
Yeah, Garage 56, that's a special entry at Le Mans that's reserved for experimental vehicles that showcase innovative technologies. It was the perfect platform for the Delta Wing to, demonstrate its potential.
And despite facing some technical challenges, the Delta Wing really proved its concept, demonstrating impressive fuel efficiency and surprising speed.
It really captured people's imaginations. Here was this unconventional, almost futuristic car holding its own against, some of the best racing teams in the world. It was a testament to Don Panoz's vision and his belief in pushing the boundaries of innovation.
The Delta Wing might not have achieved mainstream success, but its legacy, lives on as a symbol of Don Panoz's pioneering spirit and his willingness to think outside the box.
Absolutely. And speaking of Don Panoz's legacy, let's bring things back to the road and talk about the Panoz Avezzana, the last car developed under his guidance.
The Avezzana was a beautiful blend of classic design and modern performance, fitting tribute to Don Panoz's passion for creating exciting and unique automobiles.
He was a true driver's car, powerful, engine-agile handling, and a design that turned heads wherever it went. You could see the DNA of the Esperante GTR1 and its, that same spirit of pushing boundaries and challenging conventions.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the Panoz story evolved from those early days in Ireland to becoming, a major player in American motorsports and a creator of truly unique and desirable sports cars.
Yeah, their journey has been marked by innovation, a willingness to take risks, and an unwavering passion for the automotive world. And while Don Panoz may be gone, his legacy continues to inspire and influence, those who share his love for speed performance and pushing the limits of what's possible.
It's incredible to think just how far Panoz came from those humble beginnings over in Ireland. They really carved out a special place for themselves in the automotive world.
What's really fascinating to me is how they managed to stay true to their core values, throughout their entire journey, whether they were building road cars or race cars. There was always this sense of innovation, this willingness to challenge conventions, this unwavering passion for performance.
Yeah, you're right. They never seemed content with just following the crowd.
Yeah.
They always wanted to do things their own way to
Yeah.
create something truly unique and memorable.
And I think that's a big part of, what makes their story so appealing. They were driven by a desire to create something special, something that would push the boundaries of what people thought was possible.
And they achieved that from that roaring V8 engine in the Panoz Roadster to the radical design of the Delta Wing. They consistently challenged the status quo and left their mark on the automotive world.
And it wasn't just about the cars themselves. Don Panoz had this remarkable ability to bring people together to create a community around his vision. He understood that motorsports was about more than just competition. It was about passion, camaraderie, shared experiences.
But he was a true visionary, a leader who inspired others to, follow their dreams and never give up on their passions. And I think that's a legacy that will continue to resonate for years to come.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Panoz, I think it's worth taking a moment to appreciate the impact they had on American motorsports.
They helped to elevate the level of competition, they introduced innovative technologies, and they created unforgettable experiences for both drivers and fans.
They showed the world that American ingenuity could compete on a global stage, and they inspired a whole new generation of enthusiasts to embrace the thrill of racing.
So as you head out on your next drive, think about the legacy of Panoz. Remember those bold designs, that innovative spirit, and their unwavering commitment to pushing the limits of what's possible in the automotive world.
And who knows, maybe their story will inspire you to chase your own automotive dreams, to create something truly unique and memorable.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Panoz. A big thank you to you for joining me on this journey, and to all of our Vintage Car Chronicles listeners out there. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another deep dive into automotive history. Until then, keep those engines roaring.